What's up, captains? Now, before we dive into today's life-changing conversation with Bob Doyle, I want to give you a word from our sponsors. So this episode is brought to you by Lambs, my favorite EMF blocking clothing. And for my birthday, my dad got me their new and improved underwear. These are a much better design than their old pair, which did not fit me very well. I had to order a size bigger than I normally would have, but this new and improved design is fantastic and they're super comfortable. And then he also got me their new and improved shirt as well, which also fits much better. And it's super comfortable too. You would think that a shirt that's made out of silver doesn't feel that great, but it actually just feels like any other normal shirt, and it's healthier. So I actually just noticed this before recording because I haven't worn this yet. I just opened it today. Check this out. On the underside of the little shirt here, it says "Better Health Today." And then, I don't know if you guys can see this, if it's reversed or not. Then it says, "You've got this, dash your healthiest apparel." I love cool little, Easter eggs, little hidden things like that. And that's awesome to find it on Lambs. Let me check if their underwear has it. Doesn't look like it. Hint to the team at Lambs. Put more little hidden phrases on the lining of the underwear. I think stuff like that is super cool. So there you have it. And if you're not familiar with EMFs, they, in short, cause oxidative stress in the body, which contributes to a whole host of issues. Some that you'll notice immediately are things like brain fog, fatigue, trouble sleeping, irritability, headaches, like you name it. A lot of it can be contributed to oxidative stress. And if dealt with chronically, it can develop even more severe issues like Alzheimer's, dementia, and even cancer and reduced sperm count, infertility, things like that. So I love my Get Lambs gear, and they also donate 5 meals to Feeding America for each purchase. So not only do you improve your health by wearing Lambs clothing, but you also feed hungry families in need, which is a win-win, no brainer. So to get the hookup on anything from Get Lambs, head over to getlambs.com and enter code Captain Morgan. That will save you 10% on your order to become the healthiest version of you. Next up, and on the same topic of EMFs, this podcast is brought to you by WaveBlock, this sticker that I've got on the back of my phone. This is another example of a no-brainer because your phone is constantly emitting EMFs unless it's completely turned off. So I've got my phone on airplane mode all the time when I'm not using it, and it's still emitting EMFs even when it's on airplane mode, even though it's reduced. So no brainer. I slap one of these WaveBlock stickers on the back of my phone, and it significantly reduces the amount of EMFs that you're exposed to, even when your phone's on airplane mode. So now I feel completely safe and comfortable keeping my phone in my pocket. So it's not radiating my balls, reducing my sperm count, reducing my sperm quality, decreasing testosterone, contributing to erectile dysfunction. None of those things are happening. My balls are protected, not only from the Lambs underwear when I wear them, usually, especially when traveling, because I free ball it most of the time. But now I'm protected all the time with this WaveBlock sticker. So to get the hookup on anything from WaveBlock, they make stickers for the new models of iPhones and also AirPods. So if you use AirPods, they make stickers for those as well. So you're not getting the Bluetooth radiation directly into your brain. To get the hookup, anything from WaveBlock, head over to waveblock.com, enter code Captain Morgan. That will save you 20% for being a listener to the Captain's Lifestyle podcast. And last but certainly not least, I actually just took a shot of these right before recording this episode with Bob. This episode is brought to you by HVMN and their new product, Ketone IQ, which I have been in love with. I actually just hung out with the HVMN team and some of the lead ketone researchers at their booth at the Metabolic Health Summit, which was in Santa Barbara. It was an amazing summit. I actually had the privilege of attending one of the talks by, like I said, one of their lead researchers. His name is Lat. We're going to be getting a podcast in together. And he gave us some fascinating preliminary results from a study that they're doing with the U.S. Special Forces and how that they can use ketones to improve performance especially in low quality, stressful situations. What they're testing for specifically are things at altitude. So what they've been able to show is that ketones are able to increase their performance at these high altitudes. So I'm super excited to see the final results of this study because it's currently ongoing. So yeah, Ketone IQ has been amazing, and I've said before, it doesn't taste great, but it doesn't taste nearly as bad as some of these other exogenous ketone supplements that are out there. There were some pretty disgusting ones that I tried at the Metabolic Health Summit. No shade to any of those guys. I'm sure it's a very effective product. It just, I couldn't handle it. It was not great, but thankfully Ketone IQ, they work really hard on their flavor profile. And actually, let me give you guys a little preview of what potentially will be to come. I hooked up the team at HVMN with the team at Bioptimizers, specifically Mr. Newts, who I interviewed on this podcast, is very interested in learning how to encapsulate the ketones and incorporate them into the Newtopia nootropics. So don't know if that's going to happen. I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about that. So giving you guys a little heads up there, a little sneak peek of what could potentially be coming in the future, which I would be super excited for. Anyways, to get the hookup on anything from HVMN, specifically their new Ketone IQ drinkable ketones, head over to hvmn.com and enter code Captain Morgan 10. That will save you 10%. All right. With all that being said, let's dive into today's conversation with Bob Doyle. Hello, and welcome aboard another episode of the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast. This is your captain speaking, Taylor Morgan. I'm joined today by Bob Doyle, somebody who I am super excited to talk about because Bob Doyle is probably most known for his features in The Secret, the super popular book and film. And he now focuses his coaching and training on neuroplasticity, which is the science of changing your brain and your ability to literally rewire your connections in your brain so that you become the person who creates the results you want in life without having to adopt any unusual belief system. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So before we started recording, you mentioned that for a while you focused on the law of attraction, which is basically what The Secret is all about. So give us a brief overview of what that means.
Well, so first of all, the law of attraction and understanding it the way I understood it totally changed my life 20 years ago. I mean, I would train my whole life to be a broadcaster. I never meant to get into any kind of personal development. But when I had sort of my aha moments around this, and it went from being some sort of metaphysical woo-woo thing to something that I could put at least enough for my brain, some science around, and then I could see some results with it because I wasn't resisting the fact that it was, it's kind of woo-woo. I got very excited about it, started teaching it. And then of course, 3 years later, the producers of The Secret found my work. And my approach has always been to dispel the myths and try and keep it as practical as possible. Like I'm not a like attracts like guy. I always use the terminology that and I can't believe I'm hearing myself saying this again because I've so stepped away from this, but that we attract into our experience those things we're in vibrational resonance with, or I would not put the preposition at the end of the sentence, but I used a lot of that language, energy and vibration and resonance and attraction, because that's what people were very excited about. But what happened is I realized after 20 years of doing this, that people were more excited about the law of attraction than they were about changing themselves and transforming themselves and doing the work necessary to, as you said in the introduction, become the person who will attract those things in the first place. So they got so focused on the kind of the woo-woo or how can I shortcut this, right, that they lost focus on who do they need to be. They didn't want to change anything about themselves as much as they wanted the outside to change. So results were sporadic at best. And so as someone who wants to help facilitate transformation, when I kind of had this aha moment the other year, about 3 years ago, that transformation, if it's going to take and last, it's because your brain is rewired. So you have new autopilot behavior that sustains that transformation. So if it's a wiring job, The question was, well, what do we do to rewire? So instead of talking about all the energy and all those layers to get down to the transformation, now I just talk about, hey, your brain can change. And that's, no one's arguing that. Doesn't have to be symposiums arguing like the law of attraction. We all know our brain can change. So it's just about, how do we want it to change? And then what do we want to do? I mean, yes, how do we want it to change, and what will we need to do in order for that change to occur?
Yeah, I like that you made that switch, because I know for myself and a lot of the people I coach, we're high performing entrepreneurs. We want to achieve the result in the shortest amount of time and with the least amount of effort. So like when we were just talking, I was at this week-long advanced Dr. Joe Dispenza meditation retreat.
Yeah.
And the first day or two, I would find myself kind of asking myself that question, like, how can I shortcut this? Like, okay, got it. Got the big picture. Now what can I do? Like, what can I do now? How can I make this happen as quickly as possible? And of course that did not work. And Dr. Joe Dispenza actually has a series on Gaia called Rewired, where he goes over all of this science of neuroplasticity and how we can change. So I think that's fantastic that you transitioned from the law of attraction, which does seem super woo-woo to somebody who's maybe just getting into this side of things.
Yeah.
So now talk to us about neuroplasticity and how that this is a scientific fact. And
well, the cool thing about, I mean, I don't think anybody's arguing that our brains can change, but let's just look at our life. If we want to argue that, if we can learn a new thing and retain it, like a new language, for example, at any time in our life, we can decide we're going to take on a new language. Maybe we need to do it for work or whatever. So in the process of learning that, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. We're going to get frustrated. We're going to have ups and downs, successes and failures. We're, incorporating this. We're going to get better and better at it. It's going to be very uncomfortable at first. And then eventually we will be wired. Our neural pathways will be there to support the knowledge of this language. We have changed our brain by giving it new information. Our brain changes based on the information we give it for an extended amount of time. So when we were born, I'm sure most of your audience knows this, our brain's wide open, 0 to 7. We're like, yes to everything. So any sort of belief system that our parents have, society, whatever we were around, was most likely going to be our core truth. And then later we learn to analyze and question. But by that time, our wiring is so strong that we're seeing through a very focused lens. And in order to change, even if we recognize that our wiring isn't serving us, which is what most of us are doing, if they're going to find people like us, they're realizing, hey, I want to change this. Even if they want to change it, they have to be there. They need to know they're in for a ride. It's a journey, because just like it took time for you to get wired, it's going to take time for you to rewire. But the good news is we're being intentional this time. Most of the wiring that has occurred has happened on autopilot, automatically. We've just been in response mode. But if we take conscious control over the thoughts that we are sending our brain on an ongoing basis, and basically stop sending the old communication that is going on subconsciously all the time and override that, that's how we will eventually change who we're being and our wiring.
So talk to us about how we've been subconsciously programmed.
So if we're not questioning what's coming in, especially, again, age 0 through 7, we don't have the faculties to assess and evaluate, is what my mommy is telling me true? Is this, or does it serve my higher good? And we don't have any of that. We trust everything. So that's going straight to the subconscious, basically. And then based on that foundation, we make meaning out of all the other stuff we see. And we relate it to what we learned originally and make it make sense in that paradigm. So we just add layers to that original programming. So now we're 20, 30 years into life or more, and we're set. And it's just the truth. It's not an opinion. It's not our wiring. It's none of that. It's just the truth. Right. And if that's how we live, then we have very little flexibility. But if we can realize that we're just there because of programming that happened unconsciously, and understand that our brain is ready to take new programming if we'd like to give it to it. And if we will do it on a sustained basis, biology will do its thing and it will rewire you. And this new behavior will become easier and easier. Yes, you got to go through the discomfort. Yes, you make the mistakes. Yes, you have times when you feel like you went 10 steps back, but every 10 steps back is really a step forward as long as you get right back into action, because you will have learned a lot in those 10 steps. Here's the thing. It's just learning. That's all we're doing. It is just like learning a new language or learning a recipe or learning anything else. We're just sending new information to our brain. So there should be no question, will this work for me? And that's what people do. I don't know. I've tried this and that and the other thing. Wait a minute. We're not talking about a technique or a process or a theory. We're talking about the fact that your brain can change, and you've got proof of it all over the place. Think about who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I promise you there's some modification to your being. So who do you want to be? Because if you can even begin to get clear on that and imagine some of their behavior and assess the gap between who you're being now and who that person will be in the future, you can start to take on some of their traits right now. But people are wanting to wait until they get the thing. And then I can be that. And that's just not how it works.
Exactly. So I'm excited to get into this because Dr. Dispenza gave a stat, and I'm sure you know this. So correct me if I misquote it, but it's like 95% or something like that of who we are is already programmed by the time we're 35. Is that correct?
I certainly who we're being. Yes. Yeah. And this is a distinction I like to make about the who you are, because a lot of times people are like, I'm searching for who I am. Who am I supposed to be? What is my purpose? And my position is you get to decide that. So who you are is up to you. Who you be is up to you. It's just a decision. Does it resonate? Is that what you want? Is that what's calling in your heart?
So now let's get into how we can start to rewire our brains, because if up to 95% of who we are has already been pre-programmed subconsciously by the time we're 35, that can be very difficult if you're just now learning about these things. So how can somebody who has been unconsciously programmed with negative victimization thoughts, I am this way because of this person or this event that happened 10 years ago, how can they then start to rewire themselves?
First of all, they have to realize that they must give up those stories, that it's not optional, because the person that they're wanting to become will not be telling those stories, because those stories are to justify why you don't have. So why would that person's not going to tell those stories? So you want to be that person? Stop telling those stories. Tell different stories. The first step to this whole rewiring process is to understand how you're sabotaging yourself. What are those autopilot behaviors that are keeping you self-sabotaged? And once you can identify them and be conscious of them during the course of your day, then you can consciously begin to replace them. Now, of course, becoming aware of them is just the first step. It's one thing to be in a situation and go, oh, I'm in autopilot, but what are you going to do? What's the behavior that you do in that moment? That's where, the process, the process of this transformation takes place, the exercise of it, the visualization. Joe Dispenza talked about it all the time. And what the bleep, he was known for saying, every day I wake up and I visualize my day. Now, back then it meant a whole different thing to me now than it does now, because I understand so much more. And then I went through it was a law of attraction energy thing. But now I see that by visualizing your day exactly how you want it on an ongoing basis, and your brain not knowing necessarily that this is just your imagination, you're giving your brain the experience it needs. And it's through experience that the rewiring process happens. So visualization actually helps you to rewire even when you're not out there taking the action. But of course, to realize the fruits of the visualization, you must go take the action that you are visualizing. Otherwise, of course, you have no opportunity to get a result. But the good news, you get to practice and rehearse who you want to be. It's absolutely free. You can do it as much as you want. You can imagine every possible scenario that is more empowering than one that you automatically do. And then when you get in there, you've got choices.
So let's talk about this concept for a little bit, because this was one of the things that was difficult for me, and still is a little bit difficult for me to understand. So most people, myself usually included, have been waiting for a certain event or something to occur before we allow ourselves to feel the emotion associated with that event. Right? So how can we start to feel that way, the way that we'll feel when we are abundant, the way that we'll feel when we get that new relationship with whatever it is. How can we start to feel that way now and truly believe it before the actual event?
Well, first of all, why do you suppose your belief system is the way it is? Why would you think that it's hard, that it's hard to believe or whatever? What is that based on?
I think just the programming that, hard work pays off.
Yes.
So it's matter to change matter.
Yeah. It's some programming. Again, right. That's all we've learned. But what do we know for sure is that if you give the brain information on an ongoing basis, it will change itself to support that. So all the other stuff is just layers of confusion that is unnecessary. That's why I'm saying I just like the simple approach to this. Your brain can change, right? And what changes it? New information. So you're saying, well, what if we can't get into the feeling, or we won't allow ourselves or we're having a hard time experiencing the feeling of success before we get it? Is that the question?
Yeah. How can we believe that something has already happened when in actuality, like right now, it hasn't happened?
So that's not what you have to do. And that's the thing, that believing it's already happened. Now we're getting into a law of attraction conversation. Now it's what you're doing is visualizing who you will be when it happens. It's not the fantasy thing. You get to just imagine. It's not like you have to convince yourself of something that isn't true, because if you do that, you're going to lie to yourself. I'm convinced like it's already happened. That's very quantum and like, it's a layer of confusion. All you need to know is the vision of who you are going to be in that. Because remember, the end goal is actually there to pull you through the experience of life. Because I'm sure once you get close to approaching your goal or achieve it, you will immediately have another one. And if you don't, you're going to feel pretty gross, because our nature is to grow. So these goals that we have, these visions, whatever it is that we have to achieve, we do not want to attach to our happiness or feelings of success to that, because that could very likely change as you take your journey. But what you go through, the journey you take to realize that, is where all the growth happens. And then your vision might expand, but it won't expand until you take that first step. So you follow what's there, you don't attach to it, and you enjoy the process. Because once you get there, it's the process that's the juice. It's the history, the adventure, the ups and the downs, the stories, the stories you let go of, the people you met, the challenges. That's what gives you the right to be that person. And in the legitimate being, authentic being of that person, because you freaking earned it, the world will have responded in different ways than it did to you prior to that change. And that's how your life changes. Yes, there's energy. Yes, there's vibration. Yes, there's all that stuff, but you don't have to think about that. All you have to do is just be you with whatever comes up, and the world out there will shift around you.
And you mentioned one of the first steps in that is letting go of your previous stories and telling new stories. And I know that can be difficult for a lot of people, because for their whole entire life, they've labeled themselves as depressed, as anxious, as, insert thing here.
Yes. And
then they do like trauma bonding. They hang out with other people who are also depressed, who also are stressed out all the time, who also have bad luck. So for somebody who's in that position, what are some strategies that you recommend to break themselves free from that environment and truly be able to tell new stories?
Yes. Well, they have to understand that they have those stories for a reason. And it's not that it's not a bad reason. It's coping, it's explaining, it's justifying, it's giving some rationale to why their life is the way that it is. But if they can understand, if we can just, you just have a conversation with people, and I use a lot of logic in the work that I do. But if they can understand that it is a story, and that and all the meaning they make is based on a bunch of other stuff, that ideas and beliefs that probably weren't theirs. And even if they can just for a second put that on pause and say, let's think of some other ways to think. Let's just imagine, let's just play. We have to stretch our comfort zone with it. Again, we're learning new things. We're creating brand new wiring. If we've learned to protect ourselves in any way, any kind of protection mechanism, it's going to feel very unsafe. Even letting go of our old stories feels extremely unsafe if we don't know what our new story is, because those stories, as you suggested, have become our identity. We're a depressed person. We're an angry person. We're a whatever. Things don't work for me. Whatever it is, it's become a part of their identity. And if they don't know what they're going to replace it with and why it's going to be 1,000 times better, all their wiring is going to cling to the old way, regardless of how uncomfortable it is, because it knows that. And it will use every bit of logic and reasoning and rationale and pointing to experience to justify why you should not move forward. But that's because you're only dealing with the wiring you've got. That's why you've got to have help from the outside. You have to have somebody who can see something 12 million ways that you can't see it because of your wiring.
I like those words that you used, imagine and play, because that makes it seem, because if somebody is still skeptical about this, it's like, okay, just imagine, just pretend that you could be a different person. And I think that reframe will help a lot of people.
I say that to a lot of people who say they can't visualize. And I say, well, what if you could? What would you see? It's crazy how you can hack that kind of stuff. But yes, play and creativity, because here's the thing, and this is the most woo-woo thing I'll say, but we do live in a universe which is, energy. It's an ocean of energy, and we have sprung forth in this configuration of energy as a human being with amazing freaking gifts. All of our senses and our ambition and our passions and our drive and those desires, and a brain that is ready to make all of that happen. All it needs is the right information. It's just learning. If you want to do something and you don't know how to do it, how could you ever do that? I don't know how to do that. Well, do what that person did. You go learn it. However you need to do it. If it's that, you make it non-negotiable, and then you take the years to take the journey. Because even if, let's say you're 55 and you've got some dream that is unrealized and you go, but it would take me 5 years to get, then take it. Take the 5 years, because then at 60, you'll be able to have the rest of your life with what you want. But if you just sit there and rationalize and keep telling those old stories and pointing at them and saying, see all the evidence, well, then of course you're not going to do that. And you're going to just basically settle into the mediocrity that most people do, because they don't understand how ready their brain is to change.
Yeah. Mediocrity is a disease. My purpose statement is #make thriving standard. I want thriving to be the normal state. It's
why we're here. The universe is an infinitely creative thing, and we are here to create. That's why we have the desire to create, to make things, to create a life. And if we don't do it, if we don't follow what's in us, or if we try to live somebody else's version of our life, we're going to feel it. That's where the depression and the anger and the rage and the disease and all of that comes from, our inability to express how we want to express, not who we're meant to be, who we want to be on any given day. But we have so many rules about it, and rules about, well, I want to do this, but I can't make it. That's not, go be you, go play big. And if we could just, this is something that the kids are born and they play, and then we take them off that track and we say, now this is how you're going to do it. And then that wiring starts. And that's where, that whole sense of play, that creativity that we are born with and that we exhibit every day of our lives until we're put in a box, and then as adults, we're trying to tap into it again. I don't have it. I don't know what my passion is. Yeah, because it's been layered with all of these reasons why it won't happen for you, or why it can't, or it shouldn't, or whatever the message you've gotten is. It's all nonsense. And it can all be changed if you're ready to make your new vision non-negotiable.
So on that note, what do you say to people who give excuses, whether it's I don't have time or easy for you to say? What do you tell to those people?
Well, I would dig a little bit deeper, because I'd want to know, easy for you to say, I have enough time. It's, I would ask them how those stories feel. Why do you believe you don't have enough time? All of these things. And you really got to break it down, because some of those stories have layers of fact. Hypotheticals don't work real well, because I always deal with real people, and their reasons for feeling that way are, that we dig a little bit and we point to that. And if we can just expose, or even let them be open to the fact that what they're basing all of this on may not be true, then we have an opportunity. Because it's not true. And the thing about telling these, because it's all just meaning we made up. So there's no universal truth. There are events that could have unfolded, but the meaning you made out of them is all made up based on whatever. So it's all made up. So you may as well make up stories that are where you are an empowered character, where you are making a difference, where you're contributing value, where you're living your dreams. Tell that story. It's just as true as the other ones, and it's going to feel a lot better.
Exactly. Are you familiar with the definition of abracadabra?
Yeah, it's about, oh boy, I'm going to say it wrong, but it's about creation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With my words, I create.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
whatever story they're telling themselves, they tweak a few words, it can literally change completely.
So many reframes. I'll tell you one of my favorite reframes, because one of the, I have this quiz that I give people when I work with them, and it just kind of points to some of this autopilot behavior. And one of those types is the skeptic, which is exactly what I would have tested for had I taken this quiz 20 years ago. But the skeptic that I'm talking about, the reason they struggle is because every time something comes to them, they ask, why won't this work for me? Well, if you ask that question, you will get answers to that question. And then you'll be able to rationalize not doing something that might actually cause growth for you. Well, I went through, and this is why all the reasons it won't work. The skeptic that I'm talking about does not like to be wrong, doesn't like to be made an idiot out of, doesn't want to look stupid, all of those things. So they ask those questions to protect themselves, right? But it does prohibit growth. But all you got to do is reframe that question. Just flip it. You still get to be a skeptic and ask, how could this work for me? You're still analyzing, you're still assessing, you're doing your due diligence. No one's going to make a fool out of you, but how could it work for you? Because if you ask those questions, you're going to get those answers. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you might see some possibility, be willing to take a little risk and try a little something and grow.
I love that.
It's just a reframe of words.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Speaking of that quiz, I took that shortly before this interview. And so let's get a little personal now. Okay. I got the wizard. Talk to me about what that means.
So the wizard would have been my slash. I would have been skeptic / wizard, which is ironic because the wizard is really kind of into the process, the alchemy of it, loves the energy conversation and the vibration conversation, and that the universe has got this. Right. The wizard sometimes puts the universe out there and trusts the universe to deliver everything. And sometimes, and again, I want to be really clear about this quiz. Just because you test for a type doesn't mean you do this sabotaging behavior. The quiz is there to identify it if you do struggle with it. But the wizard sometimes isn't as great with action. They're waiting for the thing to occur, because they've manifested it and that type of thing. Ironically, they're doing all the things that you should do. The visualization, the vision board, these are all great tools, but they're not tools for magic. They're tools to rewire your brain. They're tools to help you see who you need to be to have those things on that board. And the other thing I really recommend to people, this is just as an aside, speaking of the vision board, the things that you put on your vision board should be the things that your future self wants, that are important to that person. Because the things that motivate you now might be from lack and fear and worry. I mean, it may look great. It may be all positive and all those other things, but you just want to make sure that who is the reality that you're creating belongs to this future you that you want to create. So anyway, but that's the wizard type. And the wizard just needs to follow through with more action so that the alchemy can be complete.
Yeah. Well, guys, I can tell you that this quiz is absolutely accurate, because that is what I've been struggling with, is inaction. I've got this phrase that everything always works out for me, which I truly believe. Like no matter what happens, I can, change my mindset, reframe it into a positive. Yep. And a lot of times that holds me back from taking action. Like even very recently, especially after the Dispenza event, when I'm thinking about all these things, I've found it difficult to start working again, whether that's, updating my course, booking client calls, doing things for the podcast. I found it difficult because there's really no drive behind it, because if the worst case scenario happens, doesn't matter. Everything always works out for me. I'll attract something else.
I see. Yeah. Right. So yeah, you got to re-fall in love with the next level you, whatever that is, and make that non-negotiable. Like, what does that person do? And maybe it's not about working more. Maybe it's time to change something. Who knows? I mean, you just did a Dispenza event. It makes sense that you might be in some questioning, and evaluating and reassessing what is next for you. So if you don't have the same drive, it might be normal. So instead of just like go with it and take this opportunity to say, okay, what's the next level? What would that person be doing? And maybe I can get excited about doing that work. And maybe it's the same work. You just need to re-plug in as to why you're doing that. But then again, you might just need a break.
Yeah. Well, this is awesome. So in addition to the skeptic and the wizard, what other types are there?
So the seeker is the number one, and that's the one who, tries everything. like everything, and just that program, that guru, this seminar, whatever. The problem is a lot of times they don't complete, and there are some reasons they don't. A lot of times it's just discomfort happens, which is what you're going for. Actually, you want to get to that so you can push through it and expand it. But a lot of people, they get uncomfortable in this program. They see some other sexy program that seems easier, or it's cheaper, or that guy's more famous, and they go, I resonate now with this, and they go over, hoping that it's going to be a smooth ride and there's never going to be any discomfort. But that's not how growth occurs. If you're doing the program, whatever it is, there's a lot of great programs out there, but they have to become a part of who you are. It's not something that you're studying for 30 minutes a day or for a week and you do it and you feel great. Because look, everybody can come off an event with all those neurotransmitters firing and you feel great and you make a lot of promises to yourself, but you must step into being that person on an ongoing basis. You can't just think about it. You step into being it so that those neurotransmitters turn into neural pathways and it becomes permanent. Because otherwise you're just going to have that high feeling after events that people have all the time. And then they just go right back.
Mm. What's your number one tip to allow people to become their higher self, like become that person now?
It is really about visualizing the impact you're going to, whatever is important to you. Like, some people want to make an impact. Some people just want to have fun, whatever it is that's really calling to you. It's about allowing yourself to feel into that and imagine, not just for a second, like being it, but like, now what does your life look like? Imagine what your life looks like when you are that person and you have those things. If you can get yourself really excited and make it non-negotiable, because if you don't, then when it gets really tough, when all the evidence is that you will not be able to do it, you will most likely quit. But if it's non-negotiable, like life and death, like I'm going to learn to walk, I got to be able to do that to function as a human being. If you can make if this non-negotiable. And then I think from there, once you do that, then it's not going to have to be so like hardcore. Do you know what I mean? It's like, once you know you can do this, once you trust in the fact that you're a human with a brain and the brain changes if you do the right things, I think you'll be a lot more relaxed about it. My goal is for people to never ask the question, will this work for me? Because you're a human. You've got a brain. If you can remember what I'm talking about, if retain information, if you can learn new things, of course it can work for you. Of course, we're just learning new ways to be, like learning Spanish or learning how to cook. But it's got to be important to you and you got to do the things. It's not a program, it's your life.
Love it. So say we took the quiz. What do you recommend next?
I did leave out one other type.
Okay.
Can I say it just to be complete? Yep. The people pleaser. And the people pleaser is the one who very excited about their own transformation, but then they get derailed if somebody has an opinion or a look on their face or a tone in their voice or something like that. They say something that triggers an old belief that they can't have or something like that. And they stop their progress to keep these people comfortable or off their backs. And of course, that doesn't really make them comfortable. They're still uncomfortable. If they weren't, they wouldn't tell you why you can't have your life. So they're going to still be in their discomfort. And of course, you just committed some kind of spiritual suicide because you said no to the life that is calling you just because mom doesn't understand. When you step powerfully into being this, you're going to attract a new tribe. I could go on and on about relationships and all of this process and how we get attached and how we've learned that if it evolves this way, it's bad or whatever. So people don't make critical moves to have the life they want because of somebody else, because, well, I've known them for 30 years, but this is not serving you, that kind of stuff. So a lot of it is just waking up to our programming and how we have been conditioned to slow ourselves down.
Yep. So what's next? We take the quiz. Talk to us about your coaching.
So you take the quiz, and then I talk about our Evolve Your Excellence program, which is how I do the work I do with people. It's a group environment. We do weekly coaching, but the key here is there's daily interaction. Now I keep everything really short in terms of new material to watch every day and that kind of stuff. But we do get people into this daily habit and we give them points for doing things because our brains like that, just stuff so that they will do the work. It's about an exercise in the morning and an exercise in the evening and catching themselves and having the tools to deal with the emotional flare-ups and all of those things that are going to occur. Because it's one thing to know, I'm in autopilot, but when the chemistry is in full blown, you're saturated with this, sometimes you're going to need a different tool for that moment to deal with that so that you can even begin to exhibit this new behavior. So we have all of that. So I just basically took all the 20 years of stuff I know actually works for people to transform, took out all of the woo-woo. There's just none of it, except to say, if you do this, it'll work automatically, and it just happens so much faster. Personally, I get so much more reward and joy out of this work because it happens so much faster, and people get these deep ahas that aren't based on like some magical realization or they're waiting for a miracle. It just makes sense. It's their transformation, their new way of being, their new results. It's just a logical outcome of the steps they're taking. So it takes all the magic out of it. And then you realize, of course I can do this.
Love it. Love it. Super simple. Where can we find more about you, your coaching, this quiz? Give us all the links.
So you can get directly to the quiz at tptquiz.com for transformation personality type quiz.com. And then all other things, you can just go to meetbobdoyle.com. The quiz will be there too, but that's sort of the hub for all things Bob, my socials, my coaching, my teaching, speaking, the whole thing, basic Bob stuff. But I'm easy to find just about anywhere. Facebook, YouTube, I'm all over. Instagram.
Perfect. All right, guys, links to everything Bob and I mentioned will be in the show notes of this podcast. And like I said, the quiz is accurate. I am absolutely the wizard. I struggle with taking action. I encourage you guys to take this quiz. It's like 60 seconds, super fast. And then with that information, I encourage you to join Bob's program because he takes the woo-woo out of it, makes it super logical. And this stuff works. So Bob, thank you so much for coming on the show. Last question. What is something you're excited about?
The metaverse, baby. So I'm a VR geek. I have been for years. And it's finally with the Quest 2 getting in more and more hands, it's more and more practical for me to start doing things in the metaverse and teaching in that space and doing things in VR that you just can't do, in real life and have events and retreats and the whole thing. So to take this conversation into the metaverse and its various platforms is very exciting to me. It's about time.
Love it. All right. Thanks again for coming on, Bob.
My pleasure.